Hello everyone, once again I hope you are doing great. This is the second lesson of syntax. Please make sure that you're watching the whole video with your attention. Today we will dive in to get to know more about syntax. So in the first slide we have meaningless subjects. It's not a condition that a subject has to be meaning. In some cases there are subjects that are meaningless. What are examples of meaningless subjects? We have non-referential it and there. Why do we call them non-referential? Because they don't refer to anything that has been mentioned previously. So subjects can be elements that are meaningless and cannot therefore be said to tell us what the sentence of which they are the subject are about. So look at these examples. The first, it is raining in England. Look at the subject. It is it. Does it have any meanings? Of course not. It is meaningless. It doesn't make sense. Alone, it. And it doesn't refer to anything. So that's why we can say this it is a meaningless subject. It is non-referential. Why? Because it does not refer to anything previously mentioned. The second example, it was hot. It was hot. This it again does not refer to anything. So why do we have these subjects? One of the characteristics of the subject was that subjects are obligatory. So we cannot have a sentence without a subject. So just to fill the gap of the subject, we use the it or there while they are playing the role of the subject. Look at the third example. There were 3 lions in the cage. This example is a little bit tricky since we have the name of a place in the cage. It is a place. But look at there. The word there. Does it refer to anything? Of course not. It only talks about existence. 3 lions exist in a case. So we call these there a non-referential subject, which is meaningless. The fourth example, there exist ways of making you talk. There are some ways that can make you talk. So again, it talks about existence. This there does not refer to anything. That's why again this there is a meaningless subject. So subjects there and it are called non-referential, existential, because they don't refer to anything previously mentioned. Look at the examples again. Has anything been mentioned before them? Of course not. Non-referential it and existential there are said to be meaningless because all they seem to be doing in the sentence in which they occur is fill the subject slot. Again, we say they only fill the gap of the subject. Let's go on and go to the next slide. We have locative there and existential there. Non-referential and referential it. So location is a word derived from the word location. If this there or the there that plays the role of the subject refers to a place, we call this there a locative there. Okay, otherwise we call existential there. The first example, it was snowing steadily outside. This it doesn't refer to anything? Of course not. So it is a non-referential it. And then it was time or is the time to go home again. Just like the previous example, I don't want to talk more about it. Can you put the bags over there? Huh? You're pointing somewhere over there, over this place. So this there refers to a place. So we call this one, the third example, a locative there. It's not non-referential. It is a referential and it refers to a place, a location. That's why we say this is a locative there. The fourth example, she went to London last year. It was there she met her husband. So this there refers to London. It was in London that she met her husband. So since the word there refers to the London, it is a locative there again. because it refers to a location. Number 5, it is New Year. This it again does not refer to anything. Number 6, I've lost my ring. I cannot find it anywhere. So this there, does it refer to anything? Yes. What does it refer to? It refers to the word or the object, which is the noun phrase my ring. I cannot find my ring anywhere. So since it refers to my ring, we can call it a referential it because it refers to something. These are the let's say the answers or the key answers for the questions or the examples. Number 4, there are 5 fingers on my hand. Just like the previous example of lions in the cage, this there only concerned with existence. I have 5 fingers on my hand. It doesn't refer to anything, any location, so that's why the seventh example, is a existential there. It is not referential. So just to remind you of the previous lecture, here we have an exercise. So identify the subjects and the predicates below. We said subject comes at the beginning. Subject sometimes can be the doer of an action or the agent, but it is not a must. And then we said the predicate is everything in the sentence except the subject. So the first example, my friend is the subject and the rest of the sentence is predicate. It was freezing cold in Moscow. It is the subject and it's a meaningless subject. It's a non-referential subject since it doesn't refer to anything. The supporters of football club down the road. These all together, that consists of 9 words altogether, is a single subject. The supporters of football club down the road. This is all one word, or we can say it has one function, which is the subject of the sentence, and the rest, destroyed our fence, is the predicate. So try to identify the subject and the predicate yourself. Like in the 4th example, the 5th and the 6th, you have about 20 seconds or maybe 30 seconds to find the subjects and the predicates in these sentences. Well, so pretty good so far. And we have the answers here. And the elements inside a predicate. So we said predicate is everything in this sentence except the subject. The first thing we have predicator. It is the most important element that specifies the main action or process denoted by the verb. However, I can say there are different opinions about predicate. Some of the linguists assume that the predicator equals to the verb, while some others assume that the predicator is the verb phrase. So let's consider these examples. The children is the subject, build a sandcastle is the predicate, and the predicator as well according to some resources. Or we can say built alone is a predicator. She again is the subject, made a very delicious cake is the predicate. Jane, Tom, and Joy, these 3 nouns together, they function as the subject of the sentence, and then we have the predicate. As we said before, there are some linguistics that assume predicator equals to verb. Okay, we have objects. So before talking about objects, there are 3 types of verbs. I would like to mention them to get to know more about the objects. The first type, we have intransitive verb. A verb that does not require an object, that doesn't need an object. I mean, this kind of verbs make sense. The meaning of the sentence is completed even without an object. Just like the example sleep. When I say I sleep, this sentence is okay, it makes sense, we don't need an object here. But when we have the second type, which is transitive verb, which is a verb that requires an object to receive an action, and we have two types. Monotransitive verbs is the first type. Whenever you see the word mono, it means it refers to one thing. So when we say a monotransitive verb, we mean that there is a verb that requires one object. Just like the example eat. I eat. Look at this example. Is it true? Of course not. It doesn't make sense. I eat. What do you eat? So we need an object here. For example, we can say I eat pizza. This pizza here is an object that's necessary to be there. Without the object, the meaning is not, let's say, or we can say the sentence is meaningless. And then we have ditransitive, or you can pronounce it as ditransitive verbs. Di or di is a prefix that refers to two things. So when we say ditransitive verb or ditransitive verb, is a verb that requires two objects, like the example of give. I gave him. Is it meaningful? Of course not. What did you give him? So we need two objects here. We need the direct and indirect object. In next slide, I will be talking about the types of objects and the characteristics of course. So short and briefly, intransitive verb is a verb that does not need an object. The meaning is okay even without an object. A monotransitive verb is a verb that requires one object. Ditransitive verb is a verb that requires having two objects. And then we have the first type, which is the direct object. What is the definition of an object? An object is a word that is being acted upon by a verb. So a direct object are constituents, maybe nouns or pronoun, being acted upon by a verb. It receives the verb's action and undergoes the activity or process donated by the verb. For example, we ate steak. So this steak for dinner, this steak undergoes the activity or the process denoted by the verb ate. His girlfriend bought this computer. This computer is being acted upon by the verb. It is the object. Whenever you have one object, the object is direct. So we cannot have one indirect object alone. When you have only one object, it is for sure a direct object. Again, that silly fool broke the teapot. The teapot is the object. Our linguistics lecturer took these photographs. So let's analyze this sentence. Our linguistics lecturer is the subject, took this photograph is the predicate, and within the predicate we have the object, this photograph, which is a noun phrase as well. So what are the characteristics of a direct object? First, like subjects, they are noun phrases. So when we say that silly fool broke the teapot is the direct object and it is a noun phrase. This is the first characteristic of direct objects. Then we have the second one. They usually come after the main verb, or the verb precedes the direct object. So we have subject, verb, and then the direct object. Number 3, direct objects have a strong relationship with the verb that precedes them. This is not that very important. And then that silly fool broke. We can see that the verb break requires the presence of a noun phrase, or we can say that break requires a direct object noun phrase. Why? Because it is a transitive verb. What kind of transitive verbs? A monotransitive verb, because it only requires one object. And then the passivation test. So changing the sentence from active voice to the passive voice, you can determine the object. You can recognize the object like that. Whenever you don't know which word is the object, so try to turn the form of the sentence into passive voice. When you say, that silly fool broke the teapot, let's assume that you don't know what is the direct object. So once you turn into passive form, the object comes right at the beginning of the sentence. When we say, the teapot was broken by that silly fool, that was the fourth characteristic of direct object. And what are the indirect objects? Earlier we saw that subjects have the role of agent or doer of an action, and that direct object has the role of patient or undergoer. The typical role associated with the indirect object is goal, receiver, or beneficiary. So it takes advantage of the situation, the indirect object. So let's look at the first example. We gave the boys the CDs. Who received the CDs? The boys or the CDs. We have two objects here. Of course, the boys, they are beneficiary. So that's why we can say the boys is the indirect object and the CDs is the direct object. The publisher sent her a review copy of the book. We have her, which is the first, let's say, object, and then we have a review copy of the book, which is another object. Which one of these objects is the receiver? A copy of the book or her? Of course, her, because she received. So that's how we can recognize the indirect object. And there is an easy way to find the direct and indirect objects. In most of the cases, the indirect object precedes the direct object. So we have subject, verb, indirect object, and then the direct object. So indirect object comes before the direct object. My father always told us, so we can say us precedes stories, the second object. So us is the indirect object and stories is the direct object. And what are the characteristics of indirect objects? They're usually noun phrases, just like the direct objects and subjects. We said that before. We gave the boys the CDs. So the CDs and the boys and we, or we can say both of the objects are noun phrases. The second characteristics, they cannot occur without following a direct object. So we say that before. Whenever you have only one object, this object is a direct object. So we gave the boys. The boys is the indirect object. But what did you give them? This sentence does not make sense. So the indirect objects cannot occur without following a direct object. When we say the publisher sent her, again, it doesn't make sense. So we have to have another object. So the third characteristic is indirect objects always precede direct objects. This is very important to recognize the indirect object. We cannot have a sentence where the order of indirect objects and direct objects has been reversed, as in we gave the CDs the boys. This is not possible. We have to say that we gave the boys the CDs. So that's how you order the objects. The fourth and the last characteristic is, like the direct objects, they can become the subjects of the passive sentence. Once the sentence is turned into passive voice, the indirect object becomes the subject of the sentence. The boys were giving the CDs by us. So thank you so much for watching the videos. Please make sure that you have understood what I've said, and if you have any kind of recommendations or let's say comments, please write down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching once again, and have a nice day.